Let's go.
All right, I'm calling the LaPorte County Drainage Board to order, and we'll lead off with the Pledge of Allegiance. You?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Speak closer.
Fruits.
Speak closer.
And here. Follow the roll call. Christine?
Hugh Glasgow.
Here.
Tony Hendricks.
Here.
Sarah Hefner.
Here.
Rich Mozinski.
Here.
John Coulter.
Here.
Stephen Rosinski.
Here.
I am here. Mike Pullen is absent, and Brad Adamski.
Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on it? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Surest ditch. Who's leading off?
Terry Jackson, probably. Terry Jackson's in the audience.
Time limit on it today.
Right.
All I've got to report between last meeting and this meeting, we
Can you lead off and introduce yourself, and then,
Jerry Jackson, City of LaPorte Wastewater Department.
all right? Go ahead now.
Okay.
Just so everybody at home knows who's up.
We had a meeting to discuss the kind of the future of Sure's Ditch and how and potential improvements. We've got a proposal from an engineering firm to look at the future development in that area and figure out what the runoff rate might be. Look at how we can protect the LaPorte Conservation Trust wetland area. And look at ownership of Sure's Ditch, because portions of it are regulated drain, parts of it are not. And then also consider the question of, is the city potentially take ownership, or the county drainage board continue to retain control and ownership. We've got a proposal just recently and taken no action on that as yet, but the city and the county are working together to make improvements and get a project here that benefits everybody involved. That's my report on the Sure's Ditch. Are there any questions?
The project there on Boyd Boulevard?
Yes.
There have been many questions. Been a continuous deal here. Question, first of all, about when the construction company found out that they had to dewater, that they just went ahead and did it without permission from the Drainage Board, without permits from IDEM. They just kind of ran over us. When it was brought up, they just pretty much ignored us here. That didn't set well with a whole lot of folks up here on this panel. But number two was, when they pulled the pumps, my understanding is that when they pulled the pumps, they're supposed to cap the well. And when
that's correct for drink. Well, go ahead.
When we brought that up, they said, "Oh yeah, we're doing that," and they sent us pictures. But then I was told that the pictures were of the pumps they pulled afterwards, and that the first ones they pulled were not capped. And that seems to be the question, as to whether they were capped or whether they were not capped. If they're not capped, and if that's open 40 feet deep to the aquifer, that's a problem. So
I know they poured bentonite in wells. I saw the bags of bentonite. There's kind of a one capping done for a deep drinking water well,
okay,
versus one for a shallow dewatering well. So we may be talking apples and oranges.
Yeah, and I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question. The bottom line is, if there's something open to the aquifer and it's not capped, then that is a serious issue with me. Okay. As I'm sure it would be with you too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Drinking water is important.
Yeah.
To follow up on that, is the city or is the contractor in contact with IDEM as they're closing these? Because it's IDEM standards, correct, on the well closure, whether...
It is for drinking water wells, generally not for dewatering wells. And none of the projects I've ever been involved with for shallow dewatering wells have required a formal closing procedure with the DNR or IDEM.
And so, as far as you're aware, on this project, DNR or IDEM are not
part
being
of the
consulted.
process for dewatering wells.
Are they all capped now?
They're all capping, meaning pouring bentonite down. That was done. That's how you close a dewatering well. As far as the more formal procedure that's used for a deep drinking water well, no, that was not done. So the normal procedure was followed for dewatering wells, I guess is what I'd say.
Is there anything like in writing that says how they capped them off? Or is that all just a hearsay kind of thing?
I can ask for a report. Generally, there aren't closure reports for a dewatering project. I mean, that's just generally not done. It is done for a deep drinking water well.
How many times before have you been involved with a dewatering project in the city?
Oh, I've got many. I would say I've got many dewatering wells at the treatment plant. That whole Fox Street project, if you recall that, all had deep wells all up and down it. Quite a few projects.
All right. So that's kind of surprising to me that IDEM and that they don't require to even know anything about it.
That's the general practice, and whether that's a good practice or not, I can see the point. But that is general practice for dewatering.
Any other questions for him?
No, I'm sure you can see the concern there that, we want to get to the bottom of it. I want to make sure it's been done right. I want to make sure that we don't have a hole that's open all the way down 40 feet deep to the aquifer. I talked with the project manager. They seem to be satisfied that it was done right. I know that what I've heard, the city has some other issues with that contractor on their way out. Things ended kind of poorly. One in particular that I've been trying to chase down is they closed a man's business up for a few days. And he told him, I'm losing business here, but he's not going to ask to be reimbursed for the business he's lost. However, he said, I'm paying employees. They're saying here that they have absolutely nothing they can do because our business is shut down. And he said, would you going to be reimbursed to pay my employees? A mere $1,450. And at first, the contractor said, oh, yeah, we'll take care of that. Then I understand they had some issues, and when they left, they said, forget it. And so the man asked me, he said, is there something we can do about that? Well, I would think that would be incumbent upon the city to make sure that if that was promised by the contractor, that somebody would reimburse it. It's not a lot of money.
It's the first time I've heard of the issue. I could say when you repave a street, generally you don't pay the business owners because they were blocked for a day or two. But I hadn't heard of that issue. Well, I can bring it up.
He had to be a friend of mine. He asked me about it, and I said, you know what, I'll check into it. And I called the engineer's office, and he said, well, he's busy right now. Let me put you on hold. After about 10 minutes of being on hold, I hung up. Because I figured that's not going anywhere.
Nick's out of town today, so I'm here.
This was Monday, I think I called. But I thought I would at least bring it up to see what procedure was there. And, I mean, when Marshall promised him, yeah, we'll take care of it. And then at the end, when they just walked away and said, we changed our mind. That didn't sign right.
Yeah, and it's all hearsay. I don't know what Marshall told them.
I know.
Yeah.
Same with me.
Yeah. Okay.
You said you were going to have some plans for down the road future. You're going to hire someone, or what's that entail?
Well, it would be improvements to Schurz Ditch. And the initial stage is is a study of what's needed, what the drainage basin is, what the land use is, what areas are tributary.
Is this going to cost like a lot of money, and it's something that Tony can supply to you? You know, what's needed for making the drain down the stream handle the water flow? I mean, that's basically what you're hiring the guy for, right?
No, we worked with Jerry and Nick Minnick, and we put together a map of all the data we have for the Schurz ditch and the map that he has with their consultants. So they're going to forward that to an engineer to do some calculations on the present, future, near future and long-term future on how this Schurz ditch that's piped can handle whatever is going to come at it from the county or the city on the east side of the town. So we've given them a lot of information to start with. We've given their foundation to work with so they can start running Army Corps HEC-RAS models on it and tell us what, nationwide, what they propose we should do as the city or the county in the present day terms, the near future, and the long-term future. So we've got them a long way started, and I think they've gotten a lot better deal by us giving that to them.
And we should have a set of plans and a cost estimate, and we can start working on how we're going to fund it.
Tony, just for the board's information then, I assume that's the meeting you're talking about with the county. You were meeting with Tony. Who else is involved in that meeting or those discussions?
No, I think the meeting was between the MS4 board and the city of Michigan City, correct?
Yeah, and when I say county, it's MS4 board.
Yeah, the MS4. Rick Brown and Mike Pullen.
Yeah.
So do you feel that there's...
Yeah, because they're going to fund it, and this board...
They're going to fund the engineer
Yes.
doing this plan?
Yes, and this board, this is not... The money that's going to be needed to fix this drain tile is far and above any money this board has from the Schurz. And if we had to, we would have to ask the council, and that has never gone very far. So it's going to be a great partnership if MS4, through the county's partnership with the city, does the engineering, and honestly, if the city pays for it and we get the tile fixed, whether it's ours or it's the city's, the tile gets fixed. Because it's in the city's best interest, and actually the county's best interest outside city limits, to make sure that this drainage way that drains this whole watershed works today, the near future, and the long-term future. So we've tried before, in my terms, and the money honestly is not going to come from the council, and there's not enough money in the Schurz assessment. And the city has the wherewithal to help us. So I wasn't in the meeting, but my communications with it is, if they'd like to pay for it, well, we'd really like you to pay for it, because we're not going to get this done on our own. We haven't done it in my career. We haven't done it in Christie's career. And
it's
if they're
the
going to give us the
city's
money,
water that's made the problem.
it's the city's
The
water. So if they
downstream
pay,
can't handle it.
yeah, if they pay. No, I guess the old term is we don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth here. They want to pay, we want it fixed. Because we're going to have to do something one way or another. Whether the city's not putting any more water down there, that tile is 100 and some years old, there's going to come a day of reckoning pretty quick.
Can't you make recommendations that can handle the water
We have.
flow?
We have made recommendations, and we're leaving that to the engineer to decide where that balance is and the size of the pipe and the type of the pipe and the cost of that installation and where that installation is going to go, because you've seen here before this board that right now that easement for the Schurz ditch runs on the north side of the tracks. There are buildings and people's homes and sheds and pole barns, and to go and disrupt all that's probably not wise. So there's discussion, that's the engineering we're doing. The discussion is, can we go to the south side of the tracks and not disrupt those people, or are we better off going to the north side, and what size pipe? A 24, a 36, a 48, a 64, what kind of pipe? Are you going to put in concrete? Are you going to put in HDPE pipe? That's all those costs have to be looked at, so we know going forward what's going to work. We know what we have today barely handles what we have, but what's going to work 5 years, 10 years, 40 years down the road, and what that cost-benefit analysis is, and how much you're going to pay today. And the city's
Are they only going to be engineering for a pipe? They can't consider an open ditch?
They can consider an open ditch, and that'll be looked at. And yes, that's possible. If we go to the south side of tracks, that might be possible, but that's more land that's taken over and more easement. That ground will be taken out of production and taken out of tax revenue. So there's all those balances, and that's why they went to an engineer consultant to see, where that balance falls.
And when you said, Mr. Jackson, you received a proposal, that was just a proposal to do this study, right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, that's where we're at. We've just received the proposal, haven't made any action on it. The Drainage Board, of course, would have opportunity to be involved in the study and review the results and pass them or not. You know, there would be some. It would be a partnership project, as Tony mentioned.
We've come a long way.
Do you propose a date of when we're going to have the answers back for this?
I didn't look either.
Yeah, I don't.
In my mind, I figured it was before the next construction season. It shouldn't take much. This is just a cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah.
Size of pipe, watershed. They have the foundation to do it. It shouldn't take very long to run that analysis. I hope spring.
You would think.
Yes, we would think spring.
Yeah, that's a reasonable time frame.
Is that something we need to tell them we want to have that by a certain time period?
I think you could recommend, but the MS4 board's paying and the city's paying. We're not putting any money into this. We're getting this for free.
Well, we're trying to fix a problem that's a pretty big problem that they've caused.
Yeah, we can't. And I would tell you now, there's no way we're going to have this done before spring rains. We'd be pushing it to get done for fall rains next year. But we hope to have the study in your hands spring.
Yeah, certainly by spring. And
We
the
don't
problem,
decide.
as you mentioned, the problem's been going on a very long time. It'd be nice to get it done sooner rather than later, but these things take time when you start working on them.
We don't know what we're in for until the analysis is done. So we expect it to be probably before this board next spring or thereafter and decide what between the city and the county drainage board, what option they think is the best. But if the city's paying for it, we'll see how much money it's going to cost.
The department's got a bond issue coming up mid next year, so I clearly want to have a cost number applied to this project by that time frame.
I had another question. Right now it's blank. Anybody else got any questions? How many feet, miles, or whatever needs to have this engineering company look at? How far down the Shears ditch do we got to go to take this water?
I think this is going all the way from to the Travis Ditch confluence.
From Travis up to the current start of the 18-inch pipe would be the study would look at the capacity for that whole run, make a determine if the existing ditch is sufficient, make a determine if the existing pipe is sufficient, which we're of course pretty sure it's not.
Only the pipe. It's the whole drainage way down to the Travis.
Yeah, we got to look downstream. Yes. That's why I was.
That's why they were very.
And all you've been talking about is the pipe.
They were very concerned that if we update the pipe, what does that affect downstream? And so the engineering watershed analysis goes all the way down to the confluence of the Travis.
Which extends beyond the city's borders, which is.
The city's borders.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Is there anybody else here to speak on the Shears ditch? We put Louis up now, as we're on the topic.
It's your discretion.
I think, Louis, it's your turn to go. I was seeing you organizing a bunch of stuff, hoping you were listening to us during that.
Crap, 40 years now.
So you heard blah, blah, blah?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Text my daughter at school.
My gosh, he's done a lot of work on it.
Did someone just sing and dance while had a dull time?
Louis Spear. I'm with
Just look at the condition of that pipe.
one of the farm owners that
100 years old.
my kids own the farm, or their portion of the farm. But the first thing I'd like to that I passed out is the water well drillers and water well pump installers. You know, the Indiana Drainage Code, the Indiana codes that pertains to that. I won't go.
Can you talk a little louder or use your microphone?
Okay, I won't go into a lot of detail on this because everything that's underlined in red and black, you know, is, you know, pertains to out there on Boyd Boulevard. And number one, nowhere in this 20-page document does it say that a dewatering well does not have to be plugged. Number one, the only person that can determine that is IDEM, the state, you know, Indiana Department of Environmental Management. They would have to sign off on that on any of these 80 24-inch in diameter dewatering wells.
Did you say 80?
Yes. It's along the whole length of Boyd Boulevard and completely surrounded that basin, which is quite a number of wells.
Out of the 80, how many are still ready to be pumped and how many have been pulled?
Well, as of the last meeting, when the Drainage Board voted to have them cease operations, and the city and the contractor proceeded to immediately start removing all of the dewatering apparatus out there. That was immediately after they started on the south end. At that time, there were 14 wells still in the ground.
Are you dating back like prior to 2019?
No, these were all put in the ground since August of this year.
This isn't a history lesson like some of the stuff we've gotten. This is what's
out there from July
did
on of this
Marshalls
year.
put in all 80 of these things?
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, when you look at the pictures, they're dated 11/14, which would be on a Sunday, and I took a picture of all 14 of the remaining wells, you know, so I'd have a record and a date of the ones that were still in the ground. Shortly thereafter, they started pulling all of those casings and from the south heading north.
What kind of date?
Well, I'd have to get onto my calendar. I don't have a calendar here.
Summertime or?
No, they pulled part of them in the summer. But the last 14 were pulled after these pictures were taken on 11/14 of this year.
Last month.
After the Drainage Board meeting was on the 12th. On the 14th, I took the pictures, and within a couple days, they started cleaning everything up out there and pulling those 14 wells that were still in the ground. They pulled them, and that's when they took pictures of. I have to get the pictures. I only have one copy. The pictures that I just turned in to you guys, they were turned in by somebody to the surveyor's office. They are undated, and they show two casings being pulled where they are putting bentonite after the casing is pulled.
I looked at it when you looked at it.
That picture, those pictures are not dated. Those two pictures of those two pipes that are being pulled are two of these.
I think that's why I asked him if he could come up with any documentation of when this happened. Because these could be pictures from 3 years ago on another site.
Well, no, they can't be, because I have pictures of the background, which I don't need to put.
So you know what's in the background, so you know they were here.
Yes, if you want me to, I'll give you those pictures also.
No, I'm just a picture, like you always have said, says 1,000 words.
Right.
So
but my pictures with the background of the two doors on the west side of Walmart with this pipe being pulled, I have the date. You know, everything I have is dated.
Well, if they pulled them all like that one, which you know that was in LaPorte, because you can see things in
Correct.
the background.
Right.
They did a pretty good job.
Right. I have everything. I have pictures that can back up, the two that were pulled. All of those wells should have been plugged from the bottom up. Number one, there should be a second pipe, which would be the grout pipe, that is in the ground with the well casing, that when they pull the casing, they're also pulling the grout pipe, which is pressurizing grout from the bottom all the way up. It's plugged from the bottom up. Under pressure, it's done simultaneously. That has not been done. They did not, to plug those wells properly, when there's a EPA 100-year use restricted site where there's contamination at Howmet, only the item will ever give them permission to not plug those wells.
Can we stop you for a second? Because he just said that IDEM and what was the other? Help me out, guys. IDEM and somebody else said that the common practice is not to do these when they're so shallow.
Well, common practice in LaPorte is dump the water on the spear farm and to hell with the spears and the farmers. That's common practice. They have not followed the law. They have not followed the well drillers' laws or the drainage laws.
Well, I think we need to find out why IDEM doesn't do this so we can find out who's at fault at not capping these wells. Was it Marshall? Was it the city? Or is IDEM? Who else was it we talked about earlier?
IDEM and DNR.
DNR.
But it's basically those two entities would have authority here. If what Louis is showing in the code is.
Well, we need proof. I feel we need proof from DNR and IDEM of why they wouldn't have to cap these things.
Yeah, I would agree.
So it's dead duck till we know.
Because it's not, the board itself doesn't have authority. Those two boards do. The state boards. If anybody has authority here, it's the state boards.
Just like you.
Correct.
Right.
So if this is what we got to do, we need to ask them to have their reports on why these didn't get capped.
I went to the LaPorte County Health Department asking for any documentation on those, the wells that were drilled out there. They have none. Nothing was done, either at the county level or at the state level. If IDEM okayed that, I want to see it. I've said that all along. You people should see it also.
Yes.
And
so
until
I want
we
to
come
ask
up
for
with
that,
it.
whether we need a motion for that or what. We need to get to the bottom of that.
I'd like to ask Brad, I'm reading this Indiana code. There's no exception for dewatering wells versus other wells.
No, in fact, dewatering is mentioned specifically in a couple of those sections, and it says that a report's got to be filed with the department, which would be IDEM. Rick Brown is here with MS4. I just was motioning to him. He says he can contact his contact at IDEM, follow up with it. I think that's what the board should be directing at this point.
The report's supposed to be filed within 30 days.
That's what that section says.
So the report should be available now because we're 30 days past.
If it were filed, or else we need to hear from IDEM why they're not requiring that report.
Well, that's it. I don't know. Maybe there is an exception that I don't see in here, but when I'm reading, it's pretty clear that there should be a report that the wells were capped. Documented report.
I'm reading it the same way you do, and I don't know the exception either. Jerry mentioned an exception. If IDEM comes back to us and says there's no requirement for this type of shallow dewatering, and here's a reference or here's a policy that says we don't require those reports, we need that information at least. But if not, then we need to know why those reports weren't filed.
Can we get a motion to have our attorney send a letter to IDEM and DNR to have this stuff brought to us by next meeting?
Can I interrupt just a second?
Is that? I can't make the motion. I'm just running the meeting.
He wanted to say
I understand that, but what needs to be done also, with this, is that there has never been a public meeting. The landowners have not been notified. I notified Ceres Farms that now owns the Morrison Farm. All of this should have been done. It affects everybody on both sides of the ditch. We have never had a public hearing. All of this has to go back to step one, because without a public hearing, I can go to a public hearing with IDEM being there and express my concerns. How can you give them permission to put a 40-foot deep dewatering well, pumping, collectively pumping 8 million gallons per day upon us from right next to a Superfund site? They have to come up with some type of determination that it's okay, not Jerry Jackson taking a sample of water and saying it's okay. It's IDEM's call, not the city, and it's not ours.
And the board's agreeing with you on that, Louis, and that's why they're directing me to go to IDEM right now. So, I think that's the proper course. I don't know that a motion is necessary, but it certainly wouldn't look bad on the record if the board wants to make a motion to take that action. And I think that's what we can do for you today.
Sounds good. I have more pictures if you want to see them later on.
I'd go one step further. I'd ask IDEM to come to our meeting. I've had dealings with IDEM before. I don't want to say they're difficult to deal with, but they're difficult to deal with. And they don't always get back to you very, very handily either. I'd like to see them at a meeting. So ask them the question. Let's get an answer right now. The longer this goes on, winter's upon us. And I'm very concerned about if there's any wells that are exposed to whatever could happen to them. Anything could happen to them. Somebody run off the road and tip their car or their truck over and spill gasoline or fuel oil or something in one of these ditches. It gets into the aquifer. It's going to be bad for years. Your grandkids are going to be dealing with it.
So that's why I need to know. Trouble with this engineer thing that's going on with this. We got to get something acting fast on the problem that's in hand.
It's a two-part request then to clarify. What you're asking for is an immediate response or a timely response from IDEM, providing all testing or reports that have been filed to them on these dewatering wells, these 80 wells that are out along Boyd Boulevard. Second part of the request is have a representative from IDEM attend the next drainage board meeting.
That's my motion.
And I'll second that.
Is there any other discussion on that?
Discussion on the motion. I would like to hear from Rick Brown. I'd like to hear any rebuttal Jerry Jackson has, because there's been a lot of charges put out here. If he has any rebuttal before we vote. Maybe, I don't know. Rick, do you have something?
Yeah, one thing first. I don't know if you guys fully voted on that. I got a hearing aid not working well. But, Mr. Dansky, that is an IDEM permitted project that did go down to IDEM. It's presently under an IDEM permitted project. There has not been a notice of termination yet. So that project on Boyd Boulevard still exists. If you guys would prefer, I call an expert at IDEM, Marty Maupin, somebody like that I actually talk with a lot. I can call him up here. I have no problem doing that. That's part of my responsibility as MS4 coordinator. Government's here to work for our taxpayers, not necessarily you guys or Mr. Spears, but just to be sure that the projects are done properly. I've not had one comment. Mr. Spears and I have talked a couple times. I've not had any negative comments other than what I've heard when I come to this board and listen to Mr. Spears talk. And I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying there are ways to maybe investigate this. Have Marty Muffin, you know the name, Tony? He can come out, he can look. I've read the rules quite a few times, fellas and ladies, but I don't remember any kind of cutoff points where you have to have something done by a certain date or a well capped at a certain date. That doesn't mean I'm just ignorant at that, at a certain date. I know the process to put the bentonite in, fill it, backfill it, let it settle, backfill it, let it settle, backfill it. What I saw, they were doing that, but I don't want to get into an argument about what well was done on what given date. But I'm throwing myself out there if you'd like me to do something or make some calls, get an expert here, I could probably do that, at least to the site. I can't guarantee your next meeting, but to the site. And then as we move along, I got something else I'd like to present. Thank you.
So I know you mentioned having Jerry speak as well, Hugh, but I think amending the motion just to direct that I coordinate the same request through Rick. I mean, it's the same as me sending the letter. It's going to be more direct if he's got a contact. So I'll coordinate with Rick to follow through with that request.
Well, us as a board knew nothing was going on out there till Louis brought it to our attention. It's my understanding, and I want someone to stop me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that Marshall's never planned to dewater nothing. So in their beginning this project, they didn't think they were going to need to dewater. So they started working on the project. All of a sudden they needed to dewater. So they just went ahead and took it amongst themselves to start the dewatering process part of it. And then that's kind of like here we are today. Now, if that had to be done in an emergency rush, they couldn't hold up their work until all this permits could happen. Us as a drainage board, I feel we need to see proof of how these got the okay to get put in.
Especially if items overseeing that.
When it's our public drain that we're in charge of, and somebody upstream is affecting somebody downstream, that's what the drainage board is for. So it's as simple as water running downhill. And if somebody's flooding somebody downstream, they're making a problem for somebody. That's the end of our job.
And, sir, on this board, like I said, I know I'm new at this, but I know enough to say that when Mr. Spear came to us and made us aware of what was going on, and we instructed our attorney, stop this project until we get some answers, they totally ignored us. They walked over us like we weren't there.
It was more important to get the job done than to ask for permission.
But don't you think
I
they could
don't
have...
mean that I agree with that.
Couldn't they at least have
That
come
was
to us and
their thoughts.
said, you know what, we did kind of get the cart before the horse here, but here's what our situation is. They never did. They never came to the table. They totally ignored us.
I will say this, getting back to what Mr. Jackson was talking about at the beginning. The way the statute reads, before they directly or indirectly affected a municipality, before they directly or indirectly affect drainage on a county-regulated ditch, they should have come to the board first. They should have gone through the surveyor's office to get basically the information they've got now, which is a surveyor saying, because of the impact, because of the project, this ditch can't hold the flow that's now being provided to it. So then they have to then create a plan for preparing that, which is what we hear they're taking steps to do now. Has this been done in the manner that the statute directs? No. For whatever reason, for whatever various reasons throughout the process. But it sounds like that's where we are eventually getting to. And if they are fronting the cost in coordination with MS4, or however it's being done, to make those repairs, to make those improvements to the Sure's ditch, that's what the statute directs this board to require of them. So that's where we are right now.
Well, if they'd have just come to us in the beginning, we'd start with, you can't start this project until downstream can handle the
right, which
amount
is
of water you're going to be.
Or you have a plan put in place for then changing that or improving it so it can handle the flow. And this is where now we've got trust issues with the public because he's been here 6-7 meetings in a row, telling us for 40 years he's been hearing these promises from whether it's county or municipality, county or city. So it's requesting a leap of faith for him to say, this time we're going to get it right, especially when we're here doing things backwards in a lot of ways. So yeah, I have had this come before the board prior to the dewatering starting, and had it been run through Tony's office the way it's supposed to be run through, with then a report that says you're adding this flow to the ditch that it can't handle. It's already an antiquated system. It's already been a problem just because of the development that's gone on out there. Come back to us with a plan on how you're going to improve that ditch, and then the board can give you permission to go forward and do that. You see this a lot in zoning issues. We're at the stage now where they're asking for forgiveness instead of permission. They did the work first, and now they're hopefully trying to make it right.
Looking at the situation we're in, okay, first of all, they didn't follow the rules on the dewatering. Second of all, when we asked them to stop, they didn't. We asked them to come and explain what was going on, they didn't. Now we're at a point where I understand they left, from what I was told, they left the city under some very non-friendly conditions. Mr. Spear is telling us that they did not cap the wells properly. I'd be more inclined to listen to him and trust him than them because of the way they've treated us, ignored us, walked over us, and pretty much just like they don't have to talk to us. So I would say this definitely bears investigation. If we find out they didn't cap these wells properly, then I would suggest that we consider litigation, because we're not going to stand still for this.
Well, whether this board would have authority on the well capping or IDEM would, I think that's a appropriate course of action. If it wasn't done correctly under the standards, whoever has the authority to enact that should be followed.
They may not even have been made aware of this yet.
We need to know.
Can you please read back the motion that's on the floor?
The motion that's on the floor is a two-part motion. It's a contact IDEM who are now has been aware of this plan, or this project. So we're contacting them to get any review or reports they have specifically regarding these wells, these 80 wells along Boyd Boulevard, and then the closing of those wells. And then the second part of the request is to have a representative of IDEM appear before this board, ideally at the January 2020 meeting, but certainly as soon as somebody's able to do so.
Yeah, we'll call a special meeting.
Right. If they're available, you can certainly do that. The second part of that is just to direct me, instead of making that request directly through me, to work with Rick Brown, who has contacts as his MS4 role with IDEM, so that we can get a quicker response.
Is there any more discussion on that motion? I want to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I just have one small thing that I just passed out. Brad, you were asking for dates on when they pull those other casings. On 6/11/17 is when this that one picture. It isn't marked on the picture, I don't believe, but I can go back to my phone and go back to the original that I zoomed in, and that is dated. All of these pictures are dated that I'm turning in with pictures, and the magnitude of the when you have 80 holes 40 feet deep, to properly plug them with bentonite, that hole has to be dry, which is impossible to achieve out there. So there isn't any bridging or anything. To fill 80 holes that are 24 inches in diameter, it would take 13 semi-loads, 20-ton semi-loads, to fill those 80 holes properly with bentonite from the bottom up in the dry method. Haven't come up with the proof that they filled, that they paid for 13 semi-loads of 13 times 260,000 pounds. They have to come up with the proof that they bought that. I never once saw a bag until I looked at the pictures that you have up there. There has never been a bag of bentonite on that job. If there was, it would be there's somewhere in those pictures. Then they could say, "See that in the back? That was a pallet. That was a semi-load of." It was never done. Thank you.
Jerry, from back there, you can answer yes or no, but does the 80 wells, does that sound right?
I don't think 80 is the correct number. I would guess it would be closer to half. And well, the casings aren't 24 inch either. They're considerably smaller. They might be 12.
All right.
So
80 sounded
like
really
a lot.
out there.
Yeah, that's a big number. There was like 17 around the basin, and then I don't know how many down but I don't think it was 80. I don't know the right number.
Was Marshall's main job to put the project in, including all the piping that runs the water to it?
Marshall hired a subcontractor to do some of the dewatering work. Is that the question?
Yeah. Basically, Marshall was the one doing it, and they might have had to hire people under it to get the job done. So it was Marshall's job, and that's all that you guys would have paid for was paid to Marshall's to get the project done.
Yeah, dewatering was incidental to the jobs, meaning it's not a separate line item.
Did they come to you before they started dewatering? Or did they just start dewatering because all of a sudden they had to do it?
The basin wasn't planned to dewater the basin. That was later. That was on the job determination. I'm not sure about the pipe. Can you speak to that? Whether it was planned to dewater for the pipe as it went up the road. I suspect it was.
John Smith Lochner, I was the project manager of the job.
Thank you.
There was 16 wells dewatering in the basin, and they pulled those way ahead before they pulled the other ones, and they were capped. They pulled the remaining 24. I don't know the exact date.
Just shoot
November.
From the hip, put it on a
November 8th-ish, somewhere in there.
Right.
But they did not plan on dewatering for the basin. That caught them by surprise. They did plan on dewatering for the pipe that was going in up to the floor store, which they did the Arconic project, so I assume they didn't dewater there, so they're probably thinking they didn't have to dewater the rest of the way. And the city cut them short. I mean, we were 2 manholes and 480 feet of getting the project done because Boyd would have never got paved. So, I mean, it was an ongoing battle with the contractor and, other issues that were going on out there. And being the middle guy isn't the fun part. And there was another thing that was brought up with the store owner, Rich. I spoke with him and the city engineer I spoke with, and I needed an email, and I talked to him, and he said he sent an email, and then later on that day, he said he was just going to go to NDOT about it, and I asked him, I said, just send me the email and try to get something worked out for you. And I still have yet to get it, and I talked to him last Thursday, so. But they capped the wells. I mean, did they dewater the way everything should have went to plan? I wasn't charged with dewatering.
Yeah.
But a lot of the water, after there was issues that I was getting from hearing from the Drainage Board, that they were sending 2,000 gallons a minute to the sanitary. So Jerry was handling all that water.
Yeah, we certainly didn't ignore the requirement not to discharge the Sure's ditch. We moved the water to the sanitary sewer and went to the treatment plant, and then it went into the adjacent wetland, the recharge the adjacent wetland. So I would disagree that we ignored the board.
Yeah, because the city even paid extra money to have a casing go across Boyd that would be able to go to the sanitary. And then, I was doing work to try to make everybody happy. I even went to Walmart and realized that all went back to Shear's ditch, but we had 3 pumps that were going into the drain that went to the basin at Walmart to find out later went that way. But the basin was not rising at all. So,
Well, thank you for coming up.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We missed you last month, though. Nobody was here from the city last month.
well, I work for an engineering firm, so they hired us to oversee the project. And
John, there's a good question. Why don't you ask him when were those pictures that I turned in to you guys that are undated? When were those pictures taken? And when was the last date that they pulled the casings out of the ground alongside Walmart?
Where'd those pictures go? 'Cause you don't have any idea what we're
I can look
talking
on my
about.
phone when I took November 19th.
Color, buddy.
He's right here.
November 19th is when the remaining wells were pulled.
Well, these were the ones he was talking about.
Yeah, that was from November
So-
19th. I think that's the 9th.
Why did you need that answered, Louis?
Pardon?
Why did you need that answered?
Well, it's simple. He said the date in November.
I was shooting from the hip.
You need to be reminded of dates.
Well,
He said he
we
was
weren't
guessing.
even asking for an exact date there. I just said somewhere around. When did the whole project start? When did Marshall's first start to break ground on this thing?
Oh, what was it? Around July. I mean,
April?
the exact date. I think they were awarded the job June 7th, I believe, and then it was a couple of weeks after that. I'd have to look at my
Sometime
records.
in June.
Yeah, mid-June, end of June.
All right, before the 4th of July.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
And they had to pull the wells before we started the pipe so the basin could
I
fill
know
up.
they don't mess around.
Yeah.
Got a lot done.
But, I can't remember what it said.
All right, that's all I have. for
Did you get your
questions.
drain as far as you wanted to go, or are you planning on doing more drain farther downstream?
That's be for the city. I don't know what their next phase for that is.
There is a second phase of this project. Hopefully we can have our issues with Sure's Ditch resolved before it's embarked on.
So phase 1 has been complete?
Almost. We ran out of time at the end of the year. It was very important to get Boyd Boulevard paved. So we cut the project a little bit short.
All right.
I do know we started the pipe September 3rd, or the day after Labor Day weekend there.
All right. Tony, you got any questions for these guys that us as regular farmers sitting on a drainage board aren't coming up with?
Well, I guess they've been to this board a couple times. Jerry and Nick have been to this board a few times and explained all this. And I think Commissioner Rosinski missed one of those meetings where Jerry was here. And that's why I didn't recall last meeting that's where we had that information, because Jerry came to this board 2 months ago and told us that. And for Lochner, they do a very good job in their inspectors. So if you guys want to see times that Louis is talking about, I'm sure they have all this documented with a timeline and everything. Like he can bring up on his phone. So that's what the city pays him to do, to document when all this happens, when the walls are pulled, when they're filled in, and when the final permits are done and the permits are closed. So I guess if the board wants to see some of that, I'm sure the city would allow Lochner to release that to us, because they get paid just to do that, just for the city, to make sure the money was spent correctly, all permits were done, engineering was followed, and everything was closed up properly, even though it might not be yet, but they're probably still working to finishing that project out. That's all.
Did you know all this last meeting when we were asking for someone to show us proof?
No, I didn't know Lochner was on the job. I wasn't sure that Nick or Jerry had hired an inspector, and it seems like they have hired it. Typically they do. I was not privy to that information because it's a city project. But if they had Lochner on the job, they're out there every day, and that's what they do, is they document this stuff for the municipality, whoever they're working for, and they're very good at it.
I do know I said November 8th. Now, that was the last day we installed pipes. The pumps were shut off. November 8th.
All right.
I'm sure they can provide that documentation.
Could you come to the microphone? There's people at home that would love to be up on this.
Okay,
stuff.
when they pulled casings on the basin, they're the first pipes that were pulled. they were shut down for several days. There was 2 feet of water, and water was running out of the weir, still into the Schurz ditch, and there was 2 foot of water in the basin. How do you pull a casing that's within 2 feet of water, 24 inches of water, and then get bentonite down in that hole?
I've never capped a well, so I can't answer that.
It can't. It can't. It's against every drainage, every well process of decommissioning a well. It can't be done.
If you pour concrete down in water, it goes to the bottom and it sets up.
Right.
I do know that much.
Well, bentonite is a clay, a dry clay material. It has to go into a dry hole. This is what I've dealt with. I sent a letter to the Drainage Board to Tony that I will bring at a later time, questioning how in the hell this is happening. It didn't happen. There were no pipes. There were no bags. And how do you do it? It's everything that comes out of their mouth is a lie.
We have any other questions for the city guys?
Not me.
I think we're moving the agenda then. I think we've got this horse beat. Mill Creek. Somebody here to speak about that?
That was asked to be carried over for this month.
Thank you guys for coming.
That was Mike Pullen's project mainly, and he's not here today, so I don't have an update for that unless Brad had.
I don't have an update. I know Mike sent an email. Was there anything in?
Yeah, we can. We'll read Mike's report. I don't think he put anything on there about it, so we'll just skip it for till next month.
The Rodman ditch.
Yeah, I don't see her here either, and I didn't hear anything since our email correspondence, so.
We're moving this agenda fast.
a question.
Was she notified that she was going to be on the agenda?
I was told to put her on, and I wasn't told to take her off, so I just left it.
Yeah, I guess I spoke quickly, and Commissioner Rosinski knows this. Christy was out there, and Mike was out there, and we have pictures of things that are happening on our easement. Shouldn't be happening. There's a storage container sitting on our easement.
She's been in my office a couple times. That's why I was hoping that maybe she had been notified to be at the meeting today so we could give her an answer on her several questions about that ditch. What I know about it, they've got a building that was put there before the ditch was put in. They have a grandfather clause on that. The building's fallen down. They want to replace it. They cannot replace it. They can fix it, but the grandfather clause does not apply to a new structure. And for the new structure, they wanted to put a Connex box there in its place. And the building commissioner told them, you can't do that either. They had other drainage issues where the county has offered to fix it. They didn't want it fixed that way. They wanted it fixed in like a really about 10 times more expensive way. And we said, we will fix it this way. They said no. And we said, well, then we're done. So they have several issues, but I'm kind of surprised and disappointed to not here today to discuss the situation.
I don't think it needs to be moved to next month's agenda unless they ask to be added to next month's agenda.
That's up to the board right now, and that's why I said I spoke too quickly, because one of the options of the board is send their 10-day notice to remove the Connex box off the easement, and that might get her attention to come to the meeting. I don't know.
Do we need a motion for that?
It's up to Brad what he would, how we handle that.
Well, this is a situation of asking for forgiveness instead of permission. She's put something on your easement. You can tell her to remove it from the easement. She's not here to seek permission to do that.
Or to tell us why it's there.
Or to tell you why it's there, why it needs to be there. And she's been before this board in the past, so she knows, I'm sure there was probably the same shed. There was issue with the shed and a fence when the board was clearing that area, last spring, the year before. The board at that time could have required her to remove that shed.
Does anybody think she should get that letter?
I mean, if it's on our easement, I think we need to send her something.
I agree.
Good.
Just a letter sending, right, just some letter notifying her that the shed is on your easement without permission, and that maybe if she doesn't respond or appear at the January meeting, that either the shed's got to be removed or you'll take further action, which could be an injunction to have it removed. Storage unit, right? It's.
Do we need that in a motion?
I prefer it in a motion.
All right.
I'll make that motion that we contact her for that purpose to remove.
Is there a second? Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Anything more on the Rodman ditch?
Really quick on that, Rich, when she came, had she represented that she's got attorney representation anymore? I know at one point she did, and then she didn't.
That came up, and she swears she does not have an attorney right now.
All right.
So just her and her husband came in.
I'll send it directly to them then.
I'm sure they'll be back in my office.
That's why it makes a big bucks.
Send him to see Steve.
The Behringer ditch.
I have proposals back for that project, and these are the specs. You can take a look at those and open those.
What do you want to look at those?
You can't see anything. Tree and brush.
Can you open them both for me?
How many dollars?
So this is telling me they're only doing one side of the ditch. That's what this said. Or does that mean yours?
Hey, that's a nice way to do it. We got a real thing here. I'll still let you do it for the next ones.
They're going to be brushing those.
Is that what they're doing?
That's what this one, right? I got that one. The first bid.
I have a question before we start.
All right.
Does this mean they're only doing one side of the ditch, Chris? According to this, the way I'm reading it, they're only going the bid is for one side. That paragraph on top.
On your working site. So they're going to work off one side, only small trees and brush in the way of equipment shall be removed. Can you remove trees?
Like that.
So they're cleaning one side of the ditch. Okay.
Yeah, I just have them working on one side and just taking out the big stuff that's in the way to get the silt out.
Is there can you define big stuff? Like anything bigger than 24 inches stays, or do we know?
These work around large trees in excess of 24 inches from diameter.
Okay.
All trees shall be cut flush with the ground, and stumps shall be left on banks. Tordon shall be applied with the stump after cutting.
Yeah, I did one. I just didn't pull it off.
Sorry.
All right. First bid proposal here is from B&D Farm Excavating. $20,220. $20,220. Funny number. That, I guess so.
I see that.
That's it.
Yeah.
Carl Metzer, second bid proposal of $15,250.
15,
250.
15,250.
15,250. This guy got one of those, and he's got his insurance proposal in there. For his insurance paper. The next one is from Beaver Excavating. 21,900. Next one is from Bailey Excavating. 22,483. We're popular. We got one more on this job.
Yeah.
Nowatzki Farms, it's our last proposal we got, of 41,275. If they had any questions on your thing, they would have called you.
Yeah, he's actually a newcomer to our bidders list, so this is the second bid we've gotten from him in my lifetime.
Is Weston Excavating on your list?
Yep.
All right.
Should be Barry Nowatzki.
Is there any questions on these bids that you guys got, or someone make a motion to pick one to do the job?
I make a motion we use the Carl Metzger bid.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor for Metzger at 15,250? Say aye.
Aye.
All those that opposed, say aye. Motion carried. Metzger has won that bid. Not always. We could be convinced. Brad Adamski, attorney reports.
I think you guys have given me enough direction today. I've got nothing to add to attorney reports.
Alrighty, thank you. Tony, surveyor reports.
I'm going to give you the surveyor's report and joint board report at the same time. The Kankakee Yellow River Basin Commission, I guess Scott Pilas called it the Basin Development Commission, awarded LaPorte County and Stark County $500,000 to start work for tree removal, dead and leaning trees on the Kankakee and the Yellow. We tentatively set a date up a week ago, Friday, to meet with Al Alsop, who won the bid. And we were going to start at English Lake, taking some of the trees out at the bridges at English Lake confluence of the Yellow and the Kankakee. But he had some equipment problems, so we're setting that up for the first week in January. And we'll have a meeting out there with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and some other people so we can start that project up and start working our way in that general vicinity. But then we will start working from 4 south, getting trees that are dead and leaning out of there as quick as we can before we get to the bat season or the fish spawning season. So any people, home viewers that want to know who's going out there, we are working diligently as quick as we can with the money from the Basin Development Commission and Al Alsop Excavating to make sure the trees are out before they fall in for the spring rains, before we have to pull them out, and they cost us a lot of money. That's all we have from the Basin Development Committee. Highway 104 south.
We sent notices to property owners.
Yes, Stark County and LaPorte County sent notices to adjacent owners, so they'll be aware. So if you get some calls, they have received notices that we'd be out there with Al also excavating. That's all I have.
All right. Any old business? Claims? Do you have any claims for us to approve?
I have 2 claims. The first one's from B&D Farm Excavating for $5,700. That's for the Ridge Run ditch. And that job is done and has been inspected, and I need to pay most of that out of the Ridge Run and then a remainder of $1,400 out of the General Drain Improvement Fund, and that'll get reimbursed in the spring.
And it's inspected your approval?
I make a motion, we pay the claim.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Second claim I have is from Beaver Excavating for the county line ditch, and that is in the amount of $10,390. And he's here today. He has a little bit more work to do on the end or on the upstream, not much, just a little bit of brushing. So I would want to make this approval subject to final inspection, which he should be done in by the end of the week. And that money would come out of the county line ditch fund.
Make a motion, we pay according to her final inspection.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And I have a really quick report about that I did get a fall collection summary from the auditor's office for ditch money we got in from the fall. So I'm going to compile that and have a report in January for the ditches that'll be assessed for next year. So we'll have good numbers in for that. So I just got that a couple days ago, so I'm working on that. So we're all good there.
Any other joint board reports?
I have one. I don't know if it's under joint board. I talked with board members from St. Joe County, and they are going to start the project on the Taylor ditch in St. Joe County and a little bit into LaPorte County. Starting, when do you think you're going to start?
I'm planning on we're over there after Carolina.
Okay.
Oh, also we had some beaver activity on the McKellips ditch, so I have our beaver trapper, who is Mike Keplin. He's about a week away from going out there and seeing if that needs to be trapped and stuff taken out, and then if we need the dam removed after that, then we'll take care of that later on.
That's over there in my area?
That's actually on the property line of Ruts and north of Ladons.
All right.
So if you hear anything going on, then that's Mike Keplin's our trapper. He's been really super busy, so he's kind of backlog right now. I call him about once a week anymore. He just took all the beavers out on the Behringer that we're getting ready to clean out there, so that should take care of that problem.
Do we pay him so much per beaver?
Yeah, actually, out of season, he does get paid. And I think the last time there was a $150 setup fee, and then it's $75 a beaver. If it's in season, it doesn't cost anything. If it's out of season, then there's a fee. And then the season is from like November to December. Pretty short.
Is that it for joint board reports? MS4 reports? Rick, you want to come up now?
Thanks, everybody, again. You guys should all have a piece of paper like this in front of you. As you know, or maybe you don't know, but MS4 is more a water quality issue than quantity, even though I get involved, and Mike and I do a lot of stuff together here. But what this is is it was kind of a real tight schedule, but we had to be sure that we could get out to the stormwater basin on Boyd. What I did is I sampled the water there. I called a company that I've used before to come out and do it. Now, but we had to do it while they still had the solid grates on the road, because they were finishing up quite fast, putting the gutters on. They had that done and the asphalt done, but the solid lids, because I wanted to get a reading of what is in the pond. That's what these are. You can look at them at another time. Basically, the numbers in yellow are the readings that we got as samples, and then what you see on the left side is basic tap water numbers. And we're under almost all the tap water. We're actually under the tap water. Now, why did we do that? Why did MS4 do that? Well, one, I think people how can government help us? Well, this is one way, because we're taking samples with the solid lids. The very next day, they put the grates on so they could start using it as a separation. And in March and April, we're going to be actually doing another set of sampling to see what's coming off the cars. We should be getting zinc. We should be getting some oils. Should be getting some transmission fluids. So we should be getting some higher readings. And then we'll kind of know, and this board will know what's actually going in that pond. And it is a separation project. So this is kind of what it is right out of those pipes that we've talked about that weren't pulled, weren't shut off, weren't used to bed at night. This is actually the dewatering water that went into the pond. Okay, I didn't ask to have E. coli done because the geese and the ducks seem to be landing there and swimming around an awful lot, so I thought that might be a high reading at this moment. So I decided not to do that. But basically, these are excellent readings. I'd like to bring your attention to the ammonia and the nitrogen at the bottom. And you'll see that little asterisk. This one was a little more difficult to get an actual reading on, because in drinking water, ammonia is not a government, but they don't have a borderline for it. I was surprised at that. But I did find, when you read at the very bottom at the asterisk, that the National Academy of Sciences and in Europe, there's a value amount that they use, which is 0.5. And of our 4 different sites that we did for that, we averaged a 0.2. So we're half, as far as any of the high readings, or so to speak, of the limits. We're under all of them. I just thought this board might want to know that going in, and then in the spring we'll get them tested again, and we'll see where we go with that. The company that I used at ALS Environmental out of Michigan, again, I've used them previous. I trust them. So, and we have a tight schedule, so we had to get it done. Anybody have any questions? This is just informative. And as far as money toward that study, MS4 has offered money to go toward that study, maybe not the full amount, but I'm in communications with the city and stuff. But we do think we need to be doing that study on the Sure's Ditch, because there's, as you know, there's legal drains, mutual drains, it's private owned, blah, blah, blah. I just think before the city actually goes and says this is our growth corridor for the next 20 years or 30 years, well, let's start coming up with ideas of how we can fix it so we can drain it. So that's the purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
While it's fresh, I want to add one more thing. I did talk to Item, the first guy from Item that came out there, and I asked him about the testing of wells. And I asked him, if a well is to be tested, do you pump the well first? And he said, no, you will have dilution. Okay, number 2, you have to test the well before any pumping takes place. You cannot pump from 8 or 10 wells and put it into the basin. You will have a cleaner content. And I said, is there any procedures on testing for contaminants? He said, yes. And you cannot, he said, you cannot pump from a well casing and then test it, because there's dilution. Because you're going to take dilution from both sides. You may have pollution from the Arconic site coming in, but you're also lowering the water from the all 4 sides. You're pulling clear water into diluted water, you're going to dilute the pollution that's there. You cannot do that.
Louis, well, we appreciate the board. I'm sure the board appreciates the information coming from you. At this point, it's hearsay, which is exactly why they want someone from IDEM to say those exact same things to the board. So
I'd like to see the procedures. I haven't been able to get them. Yeah, I haven't tried to get the procedures. There are certain procedures that you follow to take tests, and it's not by running a well for a week and a half or 2 weeks and test the water.
was there anything else, Christine, in Mike's email? Was there anything? Did that email go to the whole board, or? So it's part of the record, yeah, for our MS4 report.
It's pretty short.
Yeah. Contracting with Jeff Wright, PE, to perform design study of Church Ditch, which would cover pipe size, soil, wetland properties, flow rates, capacities, etc. MS4 and City of LaPorte will be represented at this meeting, although it should be available by phone at the meeting time if needed. MS4 board wants input from Drainage Board prior to taking action on this. His number 2 item, Hudson Lake level is high even though the drain has been operating at or near full for a long time. He plans to keep the drain open all winter and lower the lake enough to account for spring rain and melt off in 2020. Item 3, MS4 hired professional testing agency to perform water quality testing at the pond adjacent to Boyd, and those results will be available at the meeting. That's what Rick just gave his report on. And number 4, he says he hopes we have a good meeting and he will save the rest of his reports until January.
I'd like to add real fast that if, Brad, if you need it, that's just a single page that I handed out, but I do have the full, about this thick, full chain of custody, times, dates, everything that you would need associated with that company. I have a full copy if you'd like it.
Yeah, I think I'll take a copy and then get a copy to Christine or to Tony for their records.
Okay.
Any other public comment? All right. Well, then next meeting will be January 14th. This meeting is adjourned.